She's still bartending, isn't that cute? My brother Marcus announced to the entire reunion crowd, his voice carrying the particular tone of someone who believed he was being funny. Everyone laughed. I smiled, ordered a drink from the actual bartender working the event, and waited patiently for my turn to speak. Because what they didn't know was that when they asked what I did for work now, I was going to tell them something that would make every person in this room completely reassess everything they thought they knew about me. My name is Victoria Mercer. I'm 34 years old. And I own the bank that financed the construction of the hotel where my company reunion was taking place. The reunion invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier. Lincoln High School, class of 2008. 15 years. 15 years since we'd all walked out of that building, convinced we knew exactly how our lives would unfold. I hadn't planned to go. Reunions have never been my thing. The performative nostalgia, the competitive measuring of success, the careful curation of who you were versus who you'd become. It all felt exhausting. But my best friend, Denise, had convinced me. You've got to go, she'd said. You've earned it. Everyone's going to want to know what you're doing. I'd taken some time off from the office, hard-won, rare time, and agreed to attend. The reunion was at the Meridian Hotel, a luxury property in downtown Chicago that had opened 3 years ago. The architecture was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows. High ceilings. That particular kind of sophisticated elegance that only comes from significant investment and excellent design decisions. I'd arrived fashionably late, which meant about 30 minutes after the official start. Just late enough that people had started to relax. Just late enough that I could observe before being observed. I was wearing a charcoal suit and simple diamond earrings. My hair was pulled back in a low bun. I looked like what I was, someone successful, someone put together, someone who'd made something of herself. I did not look like I owned a bank. But then again, nobody really expects a woman in her mid-30s to own a bank. That's still reserved in most people's minds for older men in corner offices. I stood at the bar, waiting for my drink, when I heard my brother's voice. Victoria? Is that you? Marcus had always had that particular combination of charm and dismissiveness that made him popular without being particularly liked. He was the golden child of our family. The one who'd done everything right. Gone to a good college. Gotten a prestigious job. Married his college sweetheart. Had 2 children by age 30. And he'd spent the last 15 years making sure everyone knew it. Marcus, I said, turning to face him with a smile. Good to see you. Yeah, wow, it's been forever. He pulled me into a hug that felt performative. You look great. Still in the service industry? No, I said. I moved on from bartending a long time ago. Right, he said, as if I'd just confirmed some assumption he'd already made. What are you doing now? Still in food service, or did you finally make a move? That language. Finally make a move. As if everything I'd done before this moment was just filler. Just marking time until I did something that Marcus considered legitimate. I work in finance, I said simply. Oh nice, Marcus said, clearly not listening. Like, financial advising? That's good. That's stable. You know, a lot of people stay in their comfort zones their whole lives. It's good that you're trying to build something. I took a long sip of my drink. The reunion hall was decorated with photos from high school. Class photos. Yearbook photos. Frozen moments of all of us at 17, looking impossibly young and certain about our futures. I looked at my own photo, class president, honors student, voted most likely to succeed, and felt the familiar weight of irony. Most likely to succeed, but my brother thought I was just trying to make a move into finance. Come on, Marcus said, taking my elbow. Let me introduce you to some people. They're SA group over by the cocktail tables who'll be interested to hear what you're redoing. He led me over to a cluster of people I vaguely recognized. There was Jeff Chen, who'd been on the debate team with me. There was Amanda Torres, who'd been my chemistry lab partner. There was David Wong, who I'd had a crush on senior year. Everyone, this is my sister, Victoria, Marcus said, his arm around my shoulders in a gesture that felt more territorial than familial. She's gotten into finance. Pretty cool, right? Finance? Amanda said, genuinely interested. What kind of finance? Banking, I said. Commercial lending, primarily. Real estate development financing. That's interesting, Jeff said. Where do you work? And here's where I made a choice. I could have been vague. I could have said something neutral. I could have let the moment pass without drawing attention to myself. But I was tired. I was tired of being undersold. I was tired of my brother announcing my career to the room in diminishing terms. I was tired of people being surprised that I'd done more with my life than they thought I had. I'm the CEO of Mercer Capital, I said calmly. We're a commercial banking and development finance firm. We manage about $2.8 billion in assets. The group went quiet. Wait, David said slowly. Mercer Capital? Like, the one that's been in all the business journals. That's the one, I confirmed. I read about them, Jeff said. Didn't they do the financing for that massive Chicago development last year? The one with the mixed-use residential and commercial. And the one in downtown Denver, Amanda added. I read about that in Forbes. We finance a lot of projects, I said, not mentioning that I'd been personally involved in the acquisition and development strategy for both of those projects. That I'd analyzed hundreds of deals before settling on the ones worth our firm's capital. That I'd spent years building relationships with developers and municipal governments and community leaders. Marcus's expression had shifted. He was doing the calculation. He was realizing that maybe his sister had done more than try to make a move into finance. That's incredible, David said. How did you go from bartending to running a major banking firm? It was a good question. And it was a question I'd heard before, in various forms, from various people who'd known me in my 20s when I was bartending to pay for my MBA, working 60-hour weeks, taking every finance course I could find, networking with anyone in the industry who would talk to me. I decided I wanted something different, I said. I went back to school. I worked in various positions in banking. I learned the industry from the ground up. And when I saw an opportunity to start my own firm, I took it. Simple. Clean. Leaving out the part where I'd taken out $300,000 in student loans. Where I'd lived in a studio apartment for 7 years while my peers were buying homes. Where I'd turned down multiple promotions because they would have distracted me from my goal of starting my own company. How long has Mercer Capital been operating? Amanda asked. 11 years, I said. We started small. Just me and one other partner. Now we have 42 employees across 3 offices. Marcus was quiet. His arm had dropped from my shoulder. He was looking at me like I'd suddenly appeared from another dimension. Wow, he said finally. I didn't know you were that successful. I knew you'd done something in finance, but I didn't realize. Didn't realize what? I asked, and I kept my voice pleasant, but there was an edge to it. That you were at that level, he said. That you'd built something that big. Why would you? I said, you haven't asked me about my career since we had Thanksgiving at Mom's house in 2015. You assume I'm less successful than I actually am because you have a narrative about who I was 15 years ago, and you've never bothered to update it. The group shifted uncomfortably. This was getting more honest than reunion small talk usually got. That's not fair, Marcus said. I just made a joke. We all do that kind of thing at reunions. It doesn't mean anything. Your joke, I said calmly, was based on an assumption that I hadn't progressed beyond my 20s. That I was still a bartender. That I hadn't moved forward with my life. And maybe if it was just a joke, it wouldn't matter. But it's not just a joke, is it? It's representative of how you see me. As someone who's trying. As someone who's aspiring. As someone who hasn't quite made it. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but the event organizer was tapping the microphone. Everyone, if we could gather, she was saying, we're going to do some recognitions. I want to highlight some of our classmates who've done extraordinary things. We filtered back toward the main stage area. The organizer had prepared a list, people who'd become doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, athletes. She went through them one by one, celebrating their accomplishments. And then she paused. I want to add one more person to this list, she said, someone who wasn't on my original recognition list because I didn't fully understand the scope of her accomplishments until I started researching for tonight. Victoria Mercer, can you come up here? I hadn't expected this. Denise must have called the organizer before the reunion. Must have told her about me. I stood up and walked to the stage, aware of every eye in the room on me. Victoria Mercer, the organizer said, is the founder and CEO of Mercer Capital, a commercial banking and development finance firm that manages $2.8 billion in assets. Over the past 11 years, Mercer Capital has financed 147 major real estate development projects across the United States. This includes the Riverside development in Denver, valued at $94 million. Wait. She was talking about Sophia's project. My firm had financed that development. And the Mercer Tower in Chicago, a mixed-use development worth $340 million. But here's the thing I find most incredible. As of 6 months ago, Mercer Capital became the primary lender for the Meridian Hotel Group, which owns this hotel where we're standing right now. Which means that Victoria literally financed the renovation and expansion of this entire building. The room went absolutely silent. I looked out at the faces. At Marcus, who was pale. At Amanda, who was making some kind of mental calculation. At David, who was looking at me with something like awe. The most successful people, the organizer continued, reading from the notes Denise must have given her, are often the ones who don't announce their accomplishments. Victoria Mercer has quietly built one of the most successful banking and development finance firms in the Midwest. She's created jobs. She's financed transformative projects. She's changed the landscape of American real estate development. And she did it all while the people who knew her were still thinking of her as a bartender. Victoria, congratulations. This is truly extraordinary. Everyone applauded. Everyone except Marcus, who was staring at his drink. After the recognition, I was surrounded by people I'd gone to school with. Everyone wanted to talk to me. Everyone suddenly found me fascinating. Everyone had questions about how I'd built Mercer Capital. Everyone wanted business advice or investment recommendations or wanted to know if I was hiring. It was everything I'd expected, and it was exhausting. At the end of the night, after most people had left or moved on to an after-party I had no intention of attending, Marcus approached me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know. I should have asked. I should have kept up with what you were doing." "You should have," I agreed. "But more than that, you should have treated me with basic respect regardless of what I was doing. Whether I was still bartending or running a bank, that was still your sister. That was still your family. And you treated me like I was less than." "I know," Marcus said. "I was trying to be funny, and I ended up being cruel." "You ended up being dismissive," I corrected. "And dismissive is actually worse than cruel, because it's insidious. It's disguised as concern. It's packaged as humor. But it's still the message that you don't think I'm worth taking seriously." "I'll do better," Marcus said. "You should," I said. "But I've learned that I don't actually need you to do better. I don't need my family's validation. I needed to believe in myself, and I did. And that's enough." I left the reunion at 11 o'clock. Denise walked me to my car, a Mercedes-Benz that I'd bought myself 5 years ago when I realized I'd made it. Not made it to Marcus's level, but made it to my own level. The level where I'd accomplished things that mattered. The level where I could finance other people's dreams. The level where I could sit in a room with my high school classmates and know, not believe, but know, that I was the most successful person there. "That was perfectly done," Denise said as I got in my car. "The way you shut him down." I was so proud. "I wasn't trying to shut him down," I said. "I was trying to be honest." "There's a difference." "There is," Denise agreed. "And you did both." I drove home through Chicago at night, the city lights reflecting off the buildings I'd financed. The Mercer Tower, gleaming silver in the darkness. The renovation of the Meridian Hotel, the lobby lights visible from the street. The development projects in progress, construction cranes silhouetted against the sky. I'd built a portfolio. But more than that, I'd built a reputation. I'd built respect. I'd built something that nobody could diminish with a joke or reduce with a dismissive comment. When I got to my apartment, a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan that I'd purchased outright 3 years ago, I poured myself a drink and stood on the balcony. I thought about Marcus. I thought about all the times he'd assumed I wasn't as successful as I was. I thought about all the moments I'd had to swallow his condescension and smile anyway. And I realized something: I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something quieter and more profound than either of those things. I felt free. Because I'd finally gotten to a place where I didn't need my family's understanding of my success. I'd gotten to a place where I could define success for myself, and that definition was loud enough to drown out anyone else's narrative about who I was. My phone buzzed. A text from my COO, Gregory. "Congratulations on the reunion. How did it go?" I smiled and texted back, "Better than expected. I'll tell you about it Monday." But I didn't tell him Monday. I didn't talk about the reunion much at all. Because the real accomplishment wasn't the recognition at the reunion. The real accomplishment was that I'd gotten to a place where I didn't need that recognition to feel successful. I'd financed Sophia's $94 million neighborhood development. I'd financed David's $340 million mixed-use tower in Chicago. I'd financed the renovation of the Meridian Hotel. I'd financed 147 major development projects across the United States. And I'd done it all starting from a position where my brother thought I was still a bartender. That night, standing on my balcony overlooking Lake Michigan, I realized that this was what real success looked like. It wasn't about being recognized at reunions. It wasn't about proving yourself to your family. It was about building something so substantial, so undeniable, that when people finally looked at you, really looked at you, they had no choice but to see the truth. I own the bank that financed this building. The Meridian Hotel. The place where my high school reunion was held. The place where my brother finally understood that his sister had done more than make a move into finance. She'd built an empire. And that empire was going to keep growing, with or without anyone's acknowledgement. Because that was the real power. Not the validation. Not the recognition. The power was knowing your own worth, and never letting anyone convince you otherwise.